So if you would please state for the camera your name, your date of birth, and where we are.
Okay, I'm Nance Van Winckel,
Okay.
and I was born October 24th, 1951, and we're in Liberty Lake, Washington.
Okay. And you've been living here for?
I've been in the Spokane area since 1990,
Okay.
but my husband and I just moved out here to this little condo in '07.
Okay. And the other way is a beautiful view of the lake. Okay, so here's sort of a sort of digital and physical sort of quick questions. But so what genres do you work in as a writer?
Poetry primarily, but also I write short stories.
Okay. What kinds of devices do you own or have access to for writing?
Well, for writing, electronic devices.
Yeah, that's what I'm like.
Okay.
Computer, I mean, like.
Yeah, I work on 3 different computers. This big iMac here that I use, and then I have a laptop Mac, and then I also have an iPad.
Okay. And you write on the iPad?
I have a keyboard.
Oh, nice.
Extension for it.
And what like program do you use to write in? Do you just write with, like
I use Pages on that.
Oh, you use Pages. Okay.
And then I move it when I email it to myself.
Okay.
And then I move it into Word.
Okay.
I use that when I'm on the road.
When you're on the road, it's just iPad and
yeah.
And you're on the road quite a bit.
When I go to Vermont.
Okay. When you go to Vermont.
When I'm doing any kind of traveling.
You don't travel with the laptop. You just travel with the iPad.
I don't really take the laptop with me. I have an older laptop and it's pretty heavy.
Yeah, yes they are. Okay. So you have 3 devices, and you're a Mac user primarily.
Yeah, I'm clueless with the PC. Clueless.
Okay. And your primary. So what would you call one of these devices your primary device?
This one. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so how do you? And you sort of said this, but how do you manage your files between the devices? You email them to yourself?
Yes, with the iPad, I email files to myself. Do I do it any other way? With the laptop, I have put things on a memory stick and moved things back and forth that way. When I have to give a presentation in Vermont, and I have been doing a lot of PowerPoint things lately with art, text and art.
Yeah.
I'll bring a memory stick and use the setup that they have at the college.
Okay.
They have all good Macs and a good tech person who will
that's nice.
help me get it set up.
Yeah. So for your work, right now, are you working exclusively on computers, or do you kind of go between the physical and digital environments at all?
I work in longhand.
Okay.
On yellow legal tablets, or just whatever. I have different notebooks that I have. That's what all these notebooks are here. Are my various writing projects in process. They each get their own little notebook. And I work longhand for, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 more drafts.
Okay.
At least. Sometimes more like 10 or 12. It just depends. Some things give me more grief than others before I will type something.
All right, and we're gonna come back to that.
Okay.
What's the transition from notebook into digital? Do you type it out yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. And is that a moment of revision for you usually?
Yeah.
Or is it, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I'll probably revise. Then once I get it into a document, then I'll probably revise it.
Yeah.
Again, a number of times.
Okay.
And I'm doing different revision operations. Maybe we're going to go back to this.
We're definitely going to talk about revision more in depth. This sort of like the locating the practice now, and then we'll see where we're at that. And then, so these are the questions that professionally I'm interested in. So how do you then save these notebooks in your pre-writing and all that? I mean, do you just keep them in a box somewhere, or?
This is they.
This is it? Okay. But like your older one, like ones
Yeah,
finished projects?
they're all down there on a shelf.
They're all down there on the shelf?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. And then for your actual digital files, how do you save those? You save them just as Word docs?
Yeah, I save them as Word docs, and then when I'm done with them, you know, when the books are published, then I just put them on a backup disk and take them off my hard drive here.
Okay. Do you print out your writing to revise it?
Often when it gets to the computer stage,
yeah,
not so much.
Okay. Okay.
I'm just working on the screen then for quite a while.
So then, and then the sort of last section of this is how do you back up your work? And you say, like, when you're finished with something, you put it on a external hard drive?
Mm-hmm.
Is that your kind of digital archival backup?
Right.
Okay. And you don't use any cloud-based systems like a Dropbox or Google Drive or anything like that?
Yeah, I do use Dropbox,
Okay. Okay.
But not really so much for backup, but to send things to people.
To send things and share things?
Yeah.
Okay. Are files saved in more than one location then?
Well, I do have a backup drive, and
okay. So on the hard drive
so
on the computer,
yeah,
and then in the backup drive
yeah.
as well. Okay. Do you keep print copies of your final drafts, or?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that you have like a paper archive as well? Then?
Yes.
Okay. How do you keep? What do you do? How do you keep that? Just in the boxes, like the notebooks, kind of, or?
Yeah, they're usually with the notebooks, or yeah. I just once I print them out, I do some final kind of tinkering. Usually, like with galleys and everything, and I'll keep a copy of the galleys when the book's actually coming out, and that gets filed with the notebooks then when I'm done with it.
And then the sort of this is kind of a quick question for me personally and the librarians, but have you ever received or sought out information about methods for digital archiving activities, for like best practices?
No.
No? Okay. And would you be interested in information about that, or?
You know, maybe I was thinking about that the other day. I was thinking about making a book of selected stories from my 4 books of stories.
Oh, yeah.
And realizing that my first 2 books of stories, I don't know if I can access the computer files of them anymore. They're like on floppy disk or zip disk or something.
Oh, yeah, zip disk.
And I don't know if I could.
Yeah.
You know, does that mean I'm going to have to retype those suckers, or
There's usually
what?
a way to
yeah,
get them.
if I could even find them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's
There's
that
because
right?
you know, when we moved out here, yeah. So that would be a major task to locate, and
right.
so I could probably use some help with that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No. That's definitely something that that kind of period, especially the 90s, of all the different word processing software and then all the different ways of saving them.
Right.
Sort of put people in. What do you do? Okay, so that was sort of the quick, the quick beginning. I'm just going to check this and make sure that it looks like. The reason I kind of added that was because the DSLR apparently that's working, so we're good with that. So this is going to be more about the kind of overview of your writing practices and generally, and so the sort of first couple questions are just sort of broad, and you can elaborate as much or as little as you'd like. But so how long have you been writing in a more professional capacity, and like in a way that was sort of, I don't know, feeding you or giving you some sort of, I mean, even if like an MFA might be a kind of professional, it's sort of like, when do you think you started writing kind of this as your vocation? Whereas something that led to something that would be your vocation, which is probably teaching, I'm assuming. But.
Yeah. I guess since graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
I went to graduate school, and I thought I would just do that for a year. That was my plan. I would go to graduate school in creative writing for a year, and then I would go to medical school. I had been a pre-med major all through college.
Okay.
But when I got to grad school, I was just totally happy doing my writing thing, and I never looked back. So I started my so-called practice there, where I worked every day on my writing, and that was, I don't know, 1975.
Okay. And where was that?
I went to the University of Denver.
University of Denver, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And was that a one-year program? Or?
No, I actually stayed the regular 2 years.
Okay, okay. So you stayed 2 years and got your MFA, and then, so my next question is sort of like, I'm interested in kind of like how you would describe the arc of your career, like where you went from there, and just kind of a general, elaborate, or as elaborate as you want to be, sort of background there.
Yeah, and from there I got my first teaching job at Marymount College of Kansas, now defunct.
Okay.
So I taught there for 3 years, and then I got a job at Lake Forest College, just north of Chicago, and I taught there for 11 years. And then I came out here in 1990. Oh. And I've been here ever since.
And you retired from?
I retired from Eastern in '07.
Okay. But you're continuing to teach?
And at Vermont College.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So now we're going to get kind of, so we've always been there, but get to the kind of specific writing practices sort of generally. And I have it kind of delineated into kind of 3 stages, a sort of drafting, pre-writing notebook stage, and then a revision stage, and then a kind of organizational archival stages. Okay. And what I'd like to do is sort of go stage by stage and ask you about kind of your practices in the beginning and how those have changed for each stage. But if that doesn't make sense to you, we can do it a different
No, that makes sense.
That makes sense? Okay. So I guess I would like to first start with talking about the sort of ways you draft and create your work initially. What is your sort of typical compositional practice, especially and I'm interested right now in kind of like when you first started writing, how were you generating and composing your writing at that point? I have to push the button.
So yeah, early on, one of the things that's different now, it has been for a long time, early on I would probably just work on a poem. So I would, write, I would have a page in my notebook or whatever with some lines, and I would move things around on the page, and then I would have another page in the notebook with a different poem. But over the years, I've started working on maybe 2 or 3 poems almost kind of simultaneously on the same page, which feels kind of nutty, but what I was experiencing that kind of led me this way was that a lot of times things would be coming to me, images, lines that didn't seem to belong to the poem I thought I was working on. And so I realized that it might be helpful to not confine myself. So that's why that was one of the sort of main transitions that I've noticed in I think that happened maybe, sort of halfway along.
Okay.
Like maybe late 80s or so. I started experimenting with that, and I liked it.
Yeah.
I liked having just a page. There'd be a poem going down one margin, and then maybe down another margin, then across the bottom, something like that.
On one notebook page?
On one page.
Okay.
And then a lot of times what would happen is I didn't like 1 or 2 or all 3 of them, and eventually maybe just one of those poems would kind of gel and then get its own page.
Okay. Well, its own page in the notebook?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, so is that, could you put that at a certain book, or was that just sort of gradual?
Yeah, I think I where I really started experimenting with that was a book called Beside Ourselves. Just maybe kind of in the middle somewhere there.
Yeah, like 2003.
Yeah, that was really also maybe the first book that was more kind of deliberate series collection.
I think I can kind of, it's interesting because I think I can kind of figure out where that happened and see that
yeah.
it's kind of like,
And then I liked that. I liked working in series so much when I was writing that book that I also just decided that I wanted to keep moving in that direction. I like the series poems.
Okay.
Doing those.
Yeah, yeah.
And they maybe lent themselves more to that kind of practice with several poems kind of happening at the same time in early draft stages.
Yeah. And then how is that different from your fiction writing?
Yeah. I don't really see a lot of similarities between writing stories and writing poems in terms of the drafting process.
Okay.
Well, in terms of anything.
Okay.
Stories are really different. One of the first things I learned about writing stories in the drafting process was, it kind of helps to know a few things about what's going to happen in this story.
Right.
Not unlike a poem where you're just kind of launching into the unknown. It seemed helpful to have like a few scenes in mind, what some of the lines of tension, storylines, kind of have a few things.
Yeah.
Almost not an outline, but I often would write down 4 or 5 kind of sentences that would later become scenes.
And that would be like on one page of a notebook, or
or just a scrap of paper in the car while I'm driving.
Okay. And do those then, do you grab those scraps of paper and put them in the notebook? Does it become like, does it accumulate all that sort of detritus of composition? Or?
Once I write the scene, I throw the piece of paper away.
Yeah. It's gone. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's the generative sort of point.
Right.
So,
but then my process in making the stories would be I try to write a scene a day or so in the initial drafting phase, and I just try to stay with that scene, blow out the edges. Often it's like 3 times as long as what's going to actually be in the final story.
Okay.
Usually I'm compressing, but initially I just trying to look around and see what's happening in the periphery, and just sort of staying one scene at a time. And I don't worry about the order. I'm not writing the first scene first. I often start with the middle scene. In fact, I kind of know I'm writing a middle scene. And then I move around in the chronology of the story, because I have my little list.
Yeah.
And often when I'm working on one scene, I'll think of another scene, and then I just write it on another piece of paper, like just, again, a sentence.
Okay.
Is kind of clue. Yeah, so I don't forget, let's have a scene on this.
Okay.
But so the process is really different. It takes me, when a story is happening, when I'm getting the early draft, it comes really fast. I hate it. Because it takes all my time. I've been known to cancel classes. I'm sick today, I'm sorry, I can't come here today.
That's dedication.
Because I feel like I'm going to lose it.
Okay, so when you said it's happening, it feels like it's come to you. It's like, and it's not like an inspiration, but it's just like accumulation, or
so much is going on. I go out and I take a walk every afternoon. This is actually part of my writing process, to take a walk in the afternoon, and it's like, shut up, I'm just trying to walk.
Yeah.
The people are talking in my head, and so it feels like it's just kind of this overpowering thing when I'm working on a story. It just comes over me, and it wakes me up in the morning. People wake me up in the morning. They are chattering away. It's very unnerving.
Yeah.
And I often push back at a story until I am really sure that I have, quite a few of the building blocks in place, because otherwise it just seems like a struggle and a fight.
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to occupy, it takes me about 10 days of like 10-hour days, and 10-hour days.
Oh, wow.
It's
for one story?
For a story.
Wow. And this is all handwritten too?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's
does
just...
your hand cramp up?
No, I mean,
I guess you're thinking and then you're writing down and then you're... Okay.
I don't have any cramp on nothing, but not with the hand, with the brain.
The brain.
And then, you know, it's so much, because I don't know how other writers do this, but because I'm not writing the scenes in order, I'm kind of deliberately writing them out of order.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I write the scene I see most clearly in my mind first, and not worry about where it's going to go. Then I just put the whole thing away for a long time, that initial mess of a draft, and then worry later about kind of arranging the scenes. I'm often moving things around, not based on when they happened, but what's more interesting to come next.
Okay. And so were you studying fiction as well as poetry in your graduate school, or when did you start to write these stories?
Well, I did take a fiction writing class in grad school. I was in the poetry group, but we had to take a fiction class, and I was terrible.
Okay. I
was terrible at it, because I didn't have any sense of what made a story.
Yeah.
But when I started teaching, especially when I moved to Lake Forest College, they thought, well, any poet can teach fiction writing. You know, it's debatable if we can get a fiction writer who can teach poetry. So they hired, thinking, you know, that I could figure it out. So I think I just accidentally taught myself to write fiction by trying to help my students make their stories better, and trying to diagnose, you know, what does this story need. I remember so many days walking to my fiction writing class and trying to think about what I was going to say to this writer about her story, you know, how to address its troubles. And I realized that I was internalizing all this. And then the first time I got a sabbatical, I remember I was driving into Chicago for a little adventure for the day, and I was so happy I had the sabbatical. I was going to work on poems, of course. And I got this idea for a story. And I remember I was just writing on my car seat while I'm driving, just this little note to myself about what the story, kind of just a synopsis, like one sentence of what it would be. And by the time I got into Chicago, I had 5 story synopses written on this piece of paper.
Wow.
And then I just came home, and that's what I did for my whole sabbatical. I wrote a bunch of stories, and that was the first book of stories, limited lifetime warranty, it was called.
Yeah. And what year was that?
Oh my gosh, I think that was like 1983 or so.
Okay. And so, so you've been, stories kind of happen to you, and they've been similar the whole time that you've been writing. Have poems in similar ways like kind of come upon you, or is it a little bit more, I don't know, is it a different process than that?
Poems are more like a daily practice with me. I like poems. They don't, for me, they're more about sound and imagery, a voice, who's talking in my poems. There often some part of me that I didn't really know was there, or you know, some aspect of personality that I'm kind of exploring, who uses language a different way maybe than my ordinary daily life self. So I like that kind of quick pop of a poem. And
do you start mostly with the line or an image, or does it change? Or?
I like a line with an image in it.
Okay.
I like, one time I was writing an article about Charles Wright's poetry. I really like Charles Wright. And I said something in there in the review about the hand of the image in the glove of sound. And I took that out of the review because I thought it sounded a little precious or something. But
it's an interesting, yeah.
But for me, I like that kind of, they're sort of indivisible.
Right, right.
They come together.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's an interesting phrase.
But I remember talking to Charles one time, and I asked him a lot of the same questions you're asking me about composition, because I'm just like taking him back to the airport after a reading. I'm like plugging him for everything he can tell me about how he works. And he says, well, you know, after I do 3 or 4 drafts, then I turn it over to my ear.
Okay.
I like that.
Yeah.
He said, I drive around town, I'm doing errands, going to the store, stuff like that. And I memorize the poem I'm working on, and then I just start moving the words in the lines around, and then I start moving the lines and the stanzas around, just kind of trying out. I'm listening to the sonic values. I like that. I'm doing that.
So I guess that's a good space to move on to revision. I mean, so when you're revising a poem, are you revising mostly by sound, or I mean, like the sonic values? Is that, or are there different stages?
Well, you know, every poem just presents different troubles to me. I guess these are some of the questions I have to ask myself. This is just for me. I don't know that these will be other people's problems by any means, but I'm asking myself, who the heck is talking in this poem? Okay. Who is this person? Because sometimes I just, and I mean that in a physical, literal way, I have to see. I have to see a figure almost, you know, maybe it's me, but it's me when I'm 12, or it's me with big red hair. It's another, so I'm asking, who is this person? Where is she or he? Sometimes I think I'm in a kind of gender shift.
Okay.
I like that because I was a real tomboy as a little kid, and I think I kind of squashed that little tomboy down, and he likes to come back and say things once in a while, and he's a little bit of a sassy, snotty kid, and I like him. So who is she? Where are we in the poem?
Okay.
I need to get located in time and space, and what the heck is going on? Like, what dramatically is happening in the poem? And a lot of times I'm, you know, I'll have a fix on one or the other of these questions, but am really feeling unclear about the others, so I kind of know questions to ask myself, and that's what I do in the really early stages of drafting the poem. I'm trying to figure out the answers to some of those.
And how do these questions then translate into the basic physical manifestation of your writing? Are you still in your notebooks working?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Still in notebooks.
And are you writing these questions in the pages?
No. I'm just, what I'm doing is I'm just giving my imagination a chore, a task. I'm staring into space and trying to see, like, where is this set? Where is this unfolding? Trying to give myself.
I'm interested in all this material, and I'm really.
That's right. You're a poet too.
But I mean, it's also like, you know, like it's like it happens so much up here. It just it doesn't happen on the page. It doesn't happen. It happens a lot. Just going to the store and thinking about and listening to your own sounds, which is another hard thing to document or to sort of record.
Yeah. And see, none of this takes place with fiction. With fiction, you sort of have that. You got all that as you walk into the first scene.
Right. Right. Well, then, so what is your mode when you're revising a story? Like, how do you work through the drafts of the story?
Well, with a story, I'm really thinking a lot more about why does this happen, or why did this happen in the past tense. Asking myself a lot of questions about motivation with the characters, what their relationships are like. How did they get to this? I'm often trying to think about some details of backstory. You know, again, you know, all these things, it's really helped to have heard myself ask my students these questions for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of in there.
Yeah,
The questions to ask yourself. But I think what I'm mainly doing once I have addressed some of these questions mainly have to do with interiority and psychology of the people, is in revision, I'm just trying to get the story to move along. I'm really paying most attention to the pace.
Okay.
And I think in that regard, now poetry and fiction maybe have a little more similarities when you get to that stage of revision where you're starting to really start to tighten.
Yeah.
Are we there now? Is that what we're talking about?
No, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then with a poem, I slash mercilessly. I'm a slasher.
Yeah.
And I move things around, but often when I'm moving around is, you know, I've got too many lines on the landscape all in a row here. I've got 10 lines about the freaking place where we are. That's boring. But sometimes I won't cut them. I'll just take 4 of them and put them in a different place.
Okay.
And I don't worry too much about like how to get back there, because that's easy to do later.
Yeah.
And same in fiction. What I'm really thinking about pacing. I'm thinking about you know, like the opening of a story. I'll just start with a scene that we're going to catch back up to in the middle, but because it's got some interesting dialogue or something interesting is going on with the characters, I'm going to start there and then circle back and then catch back up to it midway through the story. Oh, here's where that scene comes. That's typical for me to move around like that. So I'm just going, okay, we've got a scene of dialogue. Now we're going to have, you know, how did this all start? Now we're going to have a scene where we've got some dream or some thinking. Now we're going to go back to dialogue. So I'm just kind of having some syncopation of pacing things.
And that kind of happens throughout your books too, right? Not only within a story, but within a collection of stories. There's sort of that same repetition of images, repetitions of scenes, or not repetition, but like a kind of allusions to the same place and time and space. So I guess is that when you're revising the entire book, is that, or when you're putting together the book itself, is that also happening?
Yes.
Okay. So have these modes of revision that sort of focus on pacing and the moving around and changes, have these changed over the course of your career? I mean, did you, like when you were first starting out writing, did you have to come to this kind of way of revising, or did it just sort of, was it there from the beginning?
No, it's been a slow, gradual process.
Okay. And in the beginning, was there a different kind of, was it more, you know, were you doing it more by the book, kind of, so to speak, or was it?
Oh gosh, I don't know how I was doing anything at the beginning. I know, you know, with my first book of poems, I had help. I've never had an editor again, like I had with that very first book, Larry Lieberman at University of Illinois Press. He weeded out some of the weaker poems, but also helped me to shape up some new things I was working on and put them in, and helped me with the arrangement. And you know, I've never had help like that again, but that was very instructive to me. He would write me these interesting little letters where he would explain, you know, why he thought this ought to go here and this go there, and this stanza needed to be gone, this was stupid, and it was just so helpful to have somebody be such a close reader with me. Like I said, I've never had that again, ever.
So do people play a role in your revision process now, or is it pretty much just you?
Well, my husband reads everything, and he's a really, really tough critic. Really, really tough. It's very good, but I think he's a smart reader, and he also kind of knows what I'm capable of, and if I don't measure up, he'll tell me.
Yeah. So you're not corresponding with other writers or with poems?
I have a couple of good fiction writer friends that I have shared work with. A novel. I had a 2-book contract with the book of stories before this one, and they wanted the second thing to be a novel. The publisher I told you who decided they were going to quit fiction, and they wanted the second book to be a novel. So I tried 3 times to write a novel, and I got 200 pages in 3 times.
Yeah.
And I showed a couple of those books to friends who are fiction writers, and they confirmed for me that what I thought was true. The way I phrase it to myself is, they didn't have a big enough engine.
Okay.
I like short stories.
I know.
I like the go-kart.
I like short stories too. I was struck though in Quake, it's less about the right, but like I was reading that and I thought it was, I mean, it read to me and felt to me a lot like the way that Jennifer Egan's Visited by the Goon Squad worked, and like separate stories but all kind of like investigating certain kind of dilemmas and interesting kind of metaphorical or metaphysical ideas.
Well, thank you. I like that Goon Squad book too.
Yeah. But I was like, well, I mean, like, what if she had called this a novel? I mean, I just was wondering, you know, I mean, like, it's not. Anyway, it's just there's very arbitrary. But it seems like you compose them very much, kind of separately. I mean, but they are related, right? I mean, they're linked stories.
Yeah, and they've all been linked.
Yeah.
I love all the different possibilities of ways to link stories.
Okay.
But in terms of the engine,
yeah,
I like a little small engine that I feel like I can fix what's wrong with a little small engine.
Okay. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
And I don't know if I could. The novel thing it's kind of overwhelming for me to think about.
Yeah.
How much you have to sustain, how much needs to drive a novel. And I love novels. I love reading them, but I'm intimidated by the arc, how huge it needs to be, and how much maybe you need to know before you sit down.
Right. There's a certain research part of it. Does your writing entail any sort of research or historical or otherwise?
Yeah. Like Quake was a good example. I loved doing all that research on the gypsy culture in the country. I just loved that.
Oh, yeah.
And that just really fed my stories when I was working on it. And this new book that has the dinosaur dig in it, that was really fun. My husband and I went out on a dig in Montana as part of the research for that. It was fun.
And do they just have that, like, dinosaur versus dinosaur discovery or something this summer? Did you see this? It was like some private digger found these like perfectly preserved fossils of like a Tyrannosaurus Rex versus like a Stegosaurus, like right next to each other. They must have died like mid-fight, and so they sold it, like, instead of giving it to like the Smithsonian, they sold it at auction for some ridiculous price.
Really?
And there was sort of a debate about that.
Just like a couple of femurs or something, a couple of like bones,
the whole
it was
creatures.
Like,
it was just like an insane find in Montana, in that bone district.
Well, what I understood was that this doesn't pertain to your thing, but what I heard was that all those glacial floods would happen, and they'd basically wash all these bones over, and so there'd be like this giant bone bed of 20 different species, but just because they've been washed by the floods like that, up the same place.
I will. You probably know a lot more about bones than I just found that was sort of exciting. I guess then a couple more questions about revision, but and then so I guess one of the I've been reading this book called The Work of Revision, which is a really interesting book, kind of tracing the history of revision from like the Romantics up through the Modernist period, and then kind of how textual criticism works with it. And she was her name's Hannah Sullivan, wrote it, and she was sort of delineating kind of 3 modes of revision, one being a creative, like Joyce adding all this stuff to Ithaca and the other parts of Ulysses, and then the sort of excisive or subtractive way that you seem to do, and then there's that sort of substitution. And I'm wondering, is there a primary mode between those three that you use for your revision, or is it a combination?
I would say I really kind of start with the excretion first, and then go into the subtraction, and then probably this substitution is like the tinkering I do at the very end.
Okay. And physically, where do these processes happen? I mean, like when you're taking something away, is that happening in the notebook? Or does that happen on the computer? Or does it happen in both spaces?
Usually I've excised much of what I'm going to take out before I type it up.
Okay.
So I probably, as I said, I'll probably do 2 or 3 handwritten drafts, and I'll actually rip the notebook page out, and I have notebooks and notebooks where I have a big X through the page so that I do not get confused that I'm actually done with this version. Now if I look hard enough in the notebook, there is a later version of this poems. But so I throw the old ripped out pages in the back of the notebook, and there's a newer version somewhere in there. But the older ones are fatter, and often, I'm also, experimenting with line break then too, and with the shaping issues.
And so just to confirm, then you're doing that in the notebook.
In the notebook still. Okay. So, and then I feel like when I move it to the computer, I'm sort of getting to a place where I want to look at it. There's something, I'm sure you're going to hear this with lots of writers my age, that there's something about when you type it up that starts to make it look permanent. Especially for me in terms of the shape of the poem. Okay. The line links, especially in a poem, I'm less inclined to fiddle with line links once I've got it on the computer. I do that. That for some reason it still feels easier for me to do it on the page because I can just stick my slashes in there.
Oh, okay.
And
so once they're actually broken into lines on the computer, then they seem, you don't feel like you still have that freedom to do.
Well, I do. I do experiment, or something. I'll go, oh, this is 15 lines. It's so close to a sonnet. Why don't I help it along? So then. I
feel like there should be like another term for a 15-line poem.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then at that point, are the poems ordered into the way you would like them in the book?
Oh, no, never. No. Okay.
So what's that process like?
Oh, that's just another process of just printing out all the poems and then just living with them. And that takes, I don't know, maybe a year, 2, maybe even longer sometimes, of experimenting with sections, the arrangement. I'm working right now on a book of prose poems, and I'm just really struggling with what's even going to be in this book, sorting.
So there's a number. So once you get to the computer, are you putting like all the poems from one notebook in one Word file, say, or are you putting them individually?
No, I don't put. Each poem is its own file.
Okay.
Until I really start to make the book as a book.
Okay. And so so just technically then you like call that file whatever the title of the poem is.
Yeah.
And then save it, say in a folder with.
My folder is called Poems.
No, that's fine.
I know, and there are some subfolders in there, like.
Okay. For a book, would you make a subfolder then, or?
Oh, then each book gets its own file then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But so the poems are kind of in one big folder, and then as they accumulate into a book, then there'll be one file.
Exactly. And when they get published, then I put them in another file called Published Poems.
Okay.
So I don't don't get confused. I'm not sending stuff
Yeah.
out still.
Yeah.
And then there's some old, I have files called Poems '08.
Right.
That are just like, I'm never going to probably do anything with them now, but they're still sitting there.
They're still in there somewhere. Okay. And is that that same sort of transfer happened with fiction too?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a file in there just called Stories in Process, and I don't know if they're going to be a book.
Sort of.
Yeah.
And so we'll get back to the computer stuff a little bit more. Let me just sort of talk a little bit, move from revision and talk a little bit more about kind of organizational. And this, we're already kind of talking about it. These things all sort of mesh in, but so I mean, well, okay. With the computer, then you move from your notebook and then you type it up, and is that's sort of a moment of revision for you too? And then you have several other different moments of revision when it's on the computer, but some of those happen in paper because you print them out.
Right.
And then that arrangement happens physically usually first.
I'll look at it I'll come back to it over a period of I don't know, a couple of weeks on the computer then, once it's in a computer file, and look at it, probably tinker with it a little bit more before, and then I'll start sending it out probably.
Okay.
So fairly soon after I type it up, maybe a month, 2 months.
Yeah.
There comes a point where I feel like I'm making it worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
My tinkering is starting to make it worse. That's the only thing that stops me. And then I start sending it out. And if
are we talking about the entire book right now? Or
no, just individual poems.
Okay. Yeah.
And then if it comes back rejected, often I'll tinker a little bit more and then send it back out again in a week.
Okay. So you use the sort of publication and submission process as a sort of revision prompt, or
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. And then then they come together in one file as your book thing, and then you send that out to the publishers. And is that a similar sort of thing? If it's rejected, do you then revise again, or is that sort of once it's in that file, once you've got it there, you just sort of want to give it a space?
I'll probably revise it a little bit more if it comes back rejected, but usually once it gets in book form, it seems sort of settled to me, and often this may be also the case. The reason for that being that I've probably moved on to another book now.
Okay.
And that
another notebook.
I'm actually compiling another book at that point when I start sending one out. And
so how many books do you usually have going, or how many projects at one time do you usually have going?
Well, I almost always have a book of poems
Yeah.
in process that I'm working on. Like I said, right now I'm trying to shape up this book of prose poems, and then I almost always have a book of fiction that's sort of in process. Right now I'm working on an e-book novella thing, and then I'm doing the photomes now. So in terms of like publishing individual pieces now, I'm really doing those a lot.
Okay. And then so in terms of just sort of saving and archiving your work, we think we talked a little bit about this. You keep your notebooks basically in boxes on the shelf, and then your files are in a folder, and they just stay in the same folder, and then you put them to an external drive at some point. Is there any other kind of archival or backup procedures that you go through for your work, or is that pretty much?
I guess that's pretty much it. I mean, my publishers, I think, have copies. They have PDFs of everything.
Right.
So
You rely on them.
I rely on them.
Okay.
That those are not going to go away.
Sure.
I don't think they will they? They won't go away, will
they? Yeah, let's hope.
Because that's what they send me to proof now.
PDFs?
Yeah.
Okay, and they used to send you galleys or printed up copies?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And do you do much revision at that stage?
No,
or is that more
they don't want you to, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then I guess one question more, and then I want to talk kind of about computers specifically. But do you see kind of in this talking that was there sort of, can you kind of delineate stages in your own writing over the course of your, the years that you've been writing sort of professionally? Do you see distinct stages, or do you think it's just been kind of a gradual?
You mean that's where things have just changed dramatically?
Or like, they could have changed over like a couple of years, but I mean, would you say there are stages, or would you just see it kind of, and if there were anything that kind of prompted some changes, what were those, I guess is where I'm kind of going with this.
Well, I think it's mostly been gradual that I've grown more comfortable doing some revision work on the computer. Okay. And especially with the fiction, and maybe because fiction still feels like a newer form to me, one shift that has felt a little bit more dramatic with composing is that I have found myself, when I'm working on short stories, actually doing some new composing work right here while I'm sitting there. Like I'll be working on a story, thinking I'm typing in from my notebook. Mm-hmm. And actually I remember working on this one story, and I had written a note to myself in my notebook that said, flesh out her dream right here. And I had forgotten to do that. So I remember sitting here doing it while I was typing in the story into my Word file, and I thought what I wrote was okay. And it sort of freed me up then to do that more frequently, to let myself do some of the initial composing, although I still kind of like have a little cue that what it's going to be, like there's a little hole that I forgot to do, and I have a note to myself in the notebook to do that.
Dude, and I guess what's the difference in feel between, I guess Derrida described it as writing with two-handed writing versus one-handed writing?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I like about doing it on the computer is I can close my eyes, which is really odd, but I like it. And so it seems to lend itself to, this is going to sound weird, not to dialogue or action, but to real kind of interior moments where I'm in a character's mind and I want to replicate her thinking process. And like I said, the first time I ever tried it was where I kind of tried to render a dream that the character had, so I closed my eyes. And, of course we can type with our eyes closed.
Right.
But I can't write with my eyes closed.
Okay. It'd be really illegible.
Yeah.
Huh. That's fascinating. Okay. So, in terms of computers generally, when did they enter into your writing process?
Well, I remember when I moved to Lake Forest College, I knew you were going to ask me this, so I was trying to think about this the other day. We got these, and I wish I could, K-Pros.
K-Pros, okay.
Have you heard of those?
No.
Oh my God. They were these huge gray boxes, and they were given to us. This must have been 1980. Right around there, 1980, at Lake Forest College, all the faculty got these K-Pro computer things, and really all they did was word processing. So, but I liked them. I remember a lot of the faculty were complaining, but I really you know, because I was moving from like a Selectric typewriter or something.
Okay.
And this machine was so much easier to do corrections and everything.
Yeah.
And so I took to the computer right away. I really liked it.
In 1980?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. That's very early.
Well, I can't remember the exact year.
But somewhere, I mean, you started teaching in Lake Forest
in 79.
So
it was right around there when we first moved there.
Yeah.
And that's all they did. They didn't do, there was no internet or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were just word processing.
Mm-hmm.
And, did this, well, the advent of this computer and then maybe like the kind of more prevalence of computers kind of change your writing practices pretty drastically eventually, or?
Well, the academic world, I don't know if I hadn't been in the academy, if I would have the same relationship with technology as I do.
Yeah.
Because everywhere I went to teach, I was presented with a new computer when I walked in the door. And it's nice.
Yeah.
And because, Apple made its money by habitualizing people. What's the word I'm trying to say?
No, I think
to their technology.
Yeah.
That's how they became so great. Get all these freshmen hooked on Apples when they're in college because they're in the labs, and then the next thing you know, you've got generations out there.
Right.
And so anyway, I'm a total Mac person. I love them. They seem really intuitive to me to use them, but I've grown up with them.
Right.
I mean.
So, and then I guess, what about the software that you used? You started with the sort of basic word processing. Then did you move to an Apple word processing software, or was it like WordPerfect, or do you remember? I mean, I can't even name.
Oh gosh, I'm not going to be able to remember all the different program names, but yeah.
And now are you using Microsoft Word? Okay, but you're also using Pages.
Yeah.
So, so you're moving between software there. Has that been a newer thing since the iPad, or?
Yeah, if I may get a new iPad pretty soon. I don't know if I want to buy another Microsoft Word.
Yeah. Pages seems.
And it's fine.
Yeah.
It moves into Word just fine.
Right.
But I learned Photoshop.
Okay.
When I was a magazine editor, I edited Willow Springs for about 6 years. And so I learned, that was in 1990. I took over the editorship of that magazine when I came out to Eastern. And they were doing the magazine with, oh my God, there was no computer technology. The woman who had done it before me was like, she was into the light board thing, which I had learned in college, in journalism class, with the sticky, peely things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you really know this stuff?
I actually saw this in high school in my journalism class. So. Yeah.
And I could not believe that they had no computer program or anything. So a guy in the journalism department gave me a copy of PageMaker to put on the computer, and I instantly fell in love with it.
Yeah.
I love this. I love doing the art for the magazine. I did the covers. I found the art and made the covers myself because there was nobody else to do it.
Right.
And so I learned PageMaker at the very beginning when it was just out.
Right.
And then, as you probably know, that became Photoshop.
Right.
So I just kind of stayed with it all these years, and
essentially, you've been using Photoshop for 20 years. Wow. That's awesome.
And I buy every other Photoshop. That's been my MO. I don't try to keep up with every single new one. So I'm on 5 now, but I will probably get 7 when it comes out.
I'm a little worried that they're not going to do that anymore. They seem to be moving to that subscription basis.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you mean?
Well, we buy it a lot for the digital computers, and I'm starting to hear that they're offering it now, so you can basically pay a monthly fee and get Photoshop. or get InDesign or get the design suite. So I'm not sure how often, if they're going to be selling those like student and teacher kind of editions anymore, or if they're going to be charging a subscription fee, which in my mind is going to be way more expensive, especially because we have so many copies. It might be cheaper overall for an individual, but
oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. I'm not actually positive about that, but it's I sort of have heard on the wind that might be coming around. Yeah.
Oh. Wow, that would be.
I don't know. I don't
hey, it's a tax write-off, so.
Yeah, there you go. So you were pretty familiar with computers from pretty much most of the professional career. As they became more prevalent in the society at large, did that affect? I mean, I guess it affected probably your correspondence with your editors and whatnot, and things like that. Did that affect anything in the way that you write? Did it start to feel different? Did writing feel different?
It felt more constant, I guess. Like my students at Vermont College, they want to send me their work, everything online now, and I feel like I cannot get away from sitting here, 10 hours, 12 hours a day, and that part I don't like as much. I like reading, in a comfy chair.
Right.
And I feel like we're moving away from that now. That's becoming less. And I'm writing ebooks myself now, so.
Yeah.
So I'm a culprit too.
Right.
But I can read my iPad in a comfy chair.
Yes. Yes, indeed. I'm gonna check this thing.
I still like reading in bed. But once I discovered that I can read my iPad in bed, I was happy.
I'm sort of interested too, I guess, in sort of typographical or graphical things. I mean, you were familiar with PageMaker. Did any of that like ability of the computer to adjust, or I mean, I think in Quake with the breaks that were kind of like little like kind of jagged lines. I don't know where those came from. If that was a computer thing or, do you know what I'm talking about?
The section breaks?
Like the breaks within the stories that would be like, like section breaks that had like kind of...
I think that might have been the book designer.
Oh, that was the book designer?
Yeah.
Okay. But did any of that influence your writing? I mean, did you start to... I mean, you obviously work with fonts and design aspects and layout. Did that influence anything with your poems? I mean, I know they also, a lot of them will have, at least the earlier ones, some of them would move kind of tab by tab, and then... I mean, there's other different sort of strategies in your poems too, but they're, I don't know. I mean, I guess
I'm trying to think about what you're asking me because I'm just not remembering.
I guess
if there's any particular way that changed in my writing itself.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was I don't know that I can say that it was, but I guess when you're writing in your note, maybe this is the way to when you're writing in your notebook. Are you writing with sort of indentation and other things like that, or are you pretty much down the left margin? Does that sort of layout thing transfer into the computer?
Yeah, you're right. What little experimenting I've done along those lines with poems, I've done on the computer screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think I know we're going to talk about this later, what I'm doing now. I'm doing these altered book pages.
Right.
I don't know if I showed you any of those because those are all blocked files. But I'm doing these altered book pages, and that's where everything I know about Photoshop and my poetry is like finally coming together into something that feels more, I don't know, my own.
Yeah.
Different.
So, we can talk about that. I mean, so is that different than the photones?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's, well, what is it? What sort of format?
Should I'll show you.
Yeah,
so I put these online. This is mainly what I've been publishing lately. I found this old encyclopedia up here from the 30s, and I've been scanning the pages.
Okay.
And especially pages that have a lot of graphic material in them. And then let me just show. So I put them on this website, but in a locked gallery, because this is how I share them then with editors.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So let's see. I'll try to find the encyclopedia ones. Wait a second. These are in here.
So Zenfolio, is it like it's like a web service kind of?
Yeah, this isn't really for a photographer's website, but I just liked it because it has a really clean look.
Yeah.
And their slideshow mode is really nice.
Yes.
So this is the book I'm doing with my husband right now, and these are his illustrations. So I can actually put this in slideshow mode. You can see the. So this is my fiction project.
Okay.
That I'm.
This is the novella.
This is and I haven't shared this actually with any editors yet because I'm only just putting this online. That's a section divider page. This is called Pull for Stop.
Okay.
So then the story goes like this. So these are Rick's pieces, and then I have this little story that goes with these characters in the book here. And each page, I think of it as a little like flash fiction.
Yeah, yeah.
So I kind of think of them as linked flash fictions.
And they're relating in some way to the image?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So that's that book. That's that book. And I was telling you about the encyclopedia, and that's Book of Knowledge.
Okay.
And so this is how I send them out now to editors. I'll probably send like 2 or 3 of these pieces in, the online submission or whatever, and then I send them a link to this this gallery.
Okay.
And the password that they need to access it, because it's a locked gallery. That way I can kind of track on, how many people are editors are looking at my stuff at the same time.
Right.
And then when somebody takes a piece, I put these little asterisks. I don't know, this is my screwed up thing.
No.
So they kind of can realize, those are out of commission then.
Sure.
So now I'm kind of actually putting a poem, and I hate all the sales stuff in here, but so then I'm actually kind of replacing the text that was here in the encyclopedia with a poem. And
so you'll do that in Photoshop, like you'll erase the text, and then are you trying to match the font in some way, it looks like, or at least
I am.
And then those are images from the text originally?
Yes, actually, they're from like 3 different pages in the text, and then I've colorized them too.
That's a really neat project.
It's really been fun. I like doing that. You can see I've kind of done a little bit of erasure stuff in here.
Yeah.
And then this part is my poem over here.
So
I should have put these in slideshows so they'll come out larger. You can see them better. But I kind of like having a mix of what was the encyclopedia language with Nance talk. Kind of, I like going back and forth. So this has been where I've really started to use the technology much more than I was before. So I have all this is the straight encyclopedia, Nance stuff, and I hope they kind of talk back and forth to each other, the language.
I see what you're saying.
My language here and their language, and
and it's sort of like it contextualizes and sort of decontextualizes it.
Yeah, this is my little conversation with Proust. I've been reading Proust this year. Me and Proust are on a timeout right now.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so that's what they look like. I like the pages from the encyclopedia that have all this graphic material.
Mm-hmm.
So I can I kind of take what was, you know, what do I have? I put all these kind of romance words around in this one. Timber wolf, love nips, musk ox, soulmate. I gave them kind of, anyway.
Yeah.
Different.
Hammer, Celeste.
But a person would have to sort of go in there and look a little bit.
Right.
Investigate.
Right. It would just be. It's. Yeah. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
Like, you need. It pays to pay attention, right?
So that's where things have sort of evolved computer-wise for me.
And how does that? I mean, what's the? Like, does it feel different? Does it just, or does it seem like the same creative process for you? I mean, it's visual and textual, so there's that. But in terms of using the computer to make, is that a change?
Well, so the way I have some really interesting different ways that I've been doing these that has never been even remotely like working on the poems or the stories. So I'll print out first the original scans in black and white, and that's what I carry around in my little notebook. You know, I'm so fixated to the notebook there.
Right. So
I'm carrying those around in the notebook, and then I just start scribbling on the pages, scribbling stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of the things that I'm kind of doing with this book project with the encyclopedia is this is my version of a collected poems of Nance Van Winckel. So I'm kind of mining some of my early poems because the idea of doing a collected or a selected or something is kind of boring to me actually.
Okay.
But this made it more interesting to do.
Yeah.
Because I'll just pull out, oh, I always like this stanza in this poem.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like this stanza. And then I just forget the rest of that poem, you know.
Right.
But these 5 lines I like, so I'll sprinkle them in there. And it's been fun to kind of find the visual material that I think they fit with.
Yeah.
So anyway,
and with the wealth of human knowledge from 1930 and wealth of
exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm kind of talking. I sense one of the things that's going on in this project is I'm talking back to history in a way and saying, no, that's not right. And I like that. There's this.
And I guess in some ways the software allows you more purchase on making those deletions and adjustments.
Exactly.
Than it would have been just like crossing out or a light board, for instance.
Right. Yeah, and the erasure thing, that a lot of people are doing.
Yeah.
That seems like, I'm good friends with Mary Ruffel, who's doing the amazing erasure stuff.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like unless I could one-up Mary Ruffel, I'm not doing that.
I know.
I'm not going there.
I know.
There are people who are doing that so much better.
I've always been a fan of that Roddy Yost, the Paradise Lost deletion by Ronald Johnson.
Oh,
Which I just didn't like. And then I like, who did one like Jonathan Safran Foer or some did it, and I was like, oh no.
Oh, he did it?
He did some terrible.
Really?
I don't know.
Yeah.
He bugs me anyway.
Yeah, I think maybe too many people jumped on the erasure.
It's fun.
Bandwagon.
Right? I mean, but it's hard. I mean, it's really, to do it in the way that Mary Ruffel does it is really, really hard. I mean, like, yeah.
Here's what Mary Ruffel says. The way I do it is I look at the page, and then pretty soon, if I just stare at it for a while, a few words float up. Good. Okay.
No. That's hilarious. Oh man, to have that happen would be.
It really would. A few words float up.
Let me think here. I feel like we've answered a lot of these questions in the course of it. Oh, can you find your files? Like, if you're looking for like a certain poem on your computer, do you have difficulty locating them, or is your organization such that you pretty much know where things are?
I have lost I have lost things, and yeah, almost every week I have a little battle because I can't remember what I called something. Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you worry at all about the security or sort of fixity of these digital files?
No.
No. That's good.
You mean somebody else accessing them or something?
Well,
that kind of security?
And then, or the kind of fidelity of them, I guess. I mean, you do say that you have floppy disks and old Word perfect documents or something that you can't access that. Is that a concern to you, or you just think that will kind of take care of itself?
It's not a concern to me. Maybe it should be.
No, I don't. I actually don't think it should be. But and I'm the one who should know that. So
okay, good.
But I mean, yeah, there's definitely things you can do. But I mean, it's one of those things that I think. Well, I guess the other question is, have the changes in computers? I mean, like probably in the late '90s, early '90s, computers crashed much more often. You were more likely to lose work. Did that ever influence the ways that you worked on computers, or was that, or you pretty much kept the same strategies?
I have pretty much kept the same strategies. I've never had a really bad thing happen where I've lost a hard drive or anything like that. I know. And, it's because I love the rocks.
They got you.
They really do.
Yeah.
I love all their products. I do.
So a few questions about correspondence and teaching, although I think we've covered some of that, and then we'll talk about the photomes, and then that'll be it. So have you ever corresponded very much in like physical letters? Has that ever been a portion? Or related to your writing? I don't need to know, like personal correspondence, not so much, but I mean like writing-wise, career-wise, was that ever
physical letters. Well, like I was telling you with that first book of poems, I've kept all the letters that he wrote to me about revision.
Yeah.
I don't know. They're very dear to me.
Right.
That somebody took that kind of time with me, and then I have a good friend who's a poet. I think I mentioned her to you, Jennifer Boyden.
Yeah.
And she really loves the physical letter, and I've kept all her letters that she's written me over the years.
Right.
Because they're just beautiful.
Oh,
And it just always seems like just the idea that somebody is writing this just to me, this 3-page letter with her thoughts and ruminations about things, and they're just so beautifully written, and that she would take the time to do that. It seems like a treasure thing because it's passing, but do I do it?
No. Do you have any similar feelings for any emails? Do you have emails that you feel dear about?
I do keep some emails. I have files with emails that I keep from certain people.
And then in a sort of corollary to that, do you feel like this is an odd question, but do you have any sort of feelings towards your digital files about like your poems? Do you feel like, are they dear to you in the same way maybe a notebook would be dear to you, or?
No.
No.
The notebook is dearer.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know why. That's weird.
You touch it. That's a big part of it, I think. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's one of those things. I don't know if that will change. Like, if someone never had like the physical in the future, if they'll like have this special folder on their desktop. That just seems odd to me. But
I try to be careful that I've always got a hard copy somewhere of the material I'm working on, like this book that I'm doing with my husband.
Okay. So that's some of the images.
And there they all are.
Oh wow, those are nice to see.
Because, and the way that, well, to finish that thought about just being careful, because if things go awry here, I don't want to lose the work completely.
Right.
So I try to make sure that I have a hard copy. It's not always the most recent copy.
Yeah.
But there's a copy.
Right.
So, and with this book, I did all of the arranging of it. I stuck them on that wall in the hallway.
Okay.
And all the pages were on that wall. And I was moving, I had little sticky things on the back, and I was moving them around to make the sections of the book for, it was up there for like 3 months.
Yeah. Huh. 3 months, huh? So you would you come home and see them and make a few changes, or was it, like, would it be a dedicated time that you'd go to it, or?
Well, I was at that stage with the book where I had all these pages, but I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to arrange the chronology again of the story.
Yeah.
So I started experimenting with different orders of things by trying the sections on the board on the wall that way. Yeah, moving them around. So before each page is its own file in there, and now they have sections too. So I think there are 5 sections in the book.
Okay. And those came from the wall?
Yes.
Okay.
So, but I could not figure out a way to look at that many pages on the screen at one time, and I mean actually see the print.
Okay. And so that was
So I felt like the technology wasn't allowing me to see the big picture the way I needed to.
Need a big touch screen.
Yes!
I'm sure they're coming. I'm sure they're here.
Yeah.
I just haven't seen them yet.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah. You need a big wall. That's a computer.
Yes! And if Mac makes it, I'm buying it. It's only going to be $1 million.
Yeah, that would definitely. I guess we did talk a little bit about your teaching, and that you do correspond by email with your students mostly. Is that now?
If they insist on
okay.
on sending me their work as attachments and everything, I'll read it that way. I don't mind doing it with the poets. With the fiction people, I would much, much rather they send me their work in the mail.
Okay.
And usually they're okay with it.
So you can kind of take it and not have to be connected and not have to, and then
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I do not like writing my comments with the Blackboard program or any of those. The college has that available to us, and I have done track changes in Word. I know how to use that, okay, but I just like to scribble in the margins.
Right. So in that aspect of your work and your life, like, you just would ultimately prefer physical correspondence in total.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then I guess the other thing with like writing and distraction, I guess, is like, are you connected to the internet when you're writing? Do you ever disconnect, turn off your Wi-Fi or something? Is that a problem or a concern for you, or do you use it? Are you are you looking things up while you're writing at all? Or?
Well, that's a good question. I don't like to be disconnected from the net anymore.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
I like to check in with my peeps all the time now.
Right. Okay.
And I mean, I use the dictionary on here all the time because it's just so much faster.
Yeah. So it's a tool, whether in whatever writing space you're in, be it notebook or not, you're still using the computer as a tool to assist you.
Yeah, and I've always got something going on that's like right now I'm talking to agents, and if they email me, if I see an email come in while I'm actually working on something, I've got to go see what that is that from my agent.
Right.
So
it hasn't, in that distraction point of it, it's not a real concern for you. I mean, you are producing quite a bit, so.
It was more when I was younger, but I guess maybe I'm learning how to go back, how to disconnect from it and go back to my work pretty fast then.
Huh. Has there been something you found to help do that? I mean, like what? I mean, if you're distinguishing between your younger working and now.
I guess maybe just like a lot of younger people, I'm just more used to being attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'll be doing something on my iPad, communicating with somebody or talking on Facebook or whatever,
yeah.
while Rick and I are watching a movie at night.
Mm-hmm.
So there's much more multitasking.
You've learned a sort of way of compartmentalizing.
Yeah.
That seems pretty seamless.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I guess the last question about teaching, like when you've had now, you're probably getting students who've grown up only with the computer,
yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Has that changed your relationship to it? I mean, has that sort of changed your idea about what it does, its effects, anything like that?
Well, it's changed to the sense that when students talk to me about their own composing process, and of course they do everything on the computer. They don't ever, a lot of them, write
mm-hmm.
anything at all in longhand.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they can. And so I'm okay with that. I feel like I've sort of made my peace that people are perfectly able to write, to find a good composition process that works for them, that doesn't have to do with paper and pens at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm accepting of that. I don't try to like shove my process off or say to someone, "Have you ever thought you might like to write it on a piece of paper first?" No, why? That's
right.
I know that I'm hanging on to something that's.
If you went
the pen and the paper to me, they have there's something else going on between the eye and the hand and the page.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And I still feel that when I'm working, especially on poems, that there's something happening between the eye and the fingers and the page that's very tactile that I'm hanging on to, that I like.
And so you would say, I mean, for those that are only composing on the computer and never going to handwriting or never using handwriting at all, that's what they're missing, that sort of hand.
I don't know. I don't think they necessarily are missing it.
Okay.
I think they've probably learned or are learning to do a step in the composing process. You know, that maybe that thing where you're writing with your eyes closed. That,
yeah.
I mean that they grow up with that, and so they get the same, whatever, imaginative connection
mm-hmm.
with the keyboard.
Do you find that they're as open to revision as maybe an older student?
Well, they can be made to. And that's just part of the learning process.
Right. So you don't think it's anything distinct to this generation?
No.
Okay.
I think they just have to, many of them, some of them get it right away, that revising can actually make a work better.
Yeah.
You know, I've been working with this woman right now who came in saying that she doesn't like to revise because she likes to just sit down and write everything out really fast in one big draft.
Great.
And her stuff is a mess. And so it's my personal mission with her to help her to come to believe that actually revising or working in some other manner, you know, like maybe writing a scene at a time,
right,
will benefit the work. But she's very young, and this is her first. She didn't even have an undergraduate degree in writing, so she's starting at square one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the last kind of group of questions I have are about the photomes, and but I guess you have a number of different. I was thinking of these being your sort of primary computer-assisted project, but you have several going at the same time. It seems, including the collected, your novella. Are there other projects as well? Okay, and are they supplanting your fiction and poetry writing, or are they sort of just in addition to?
I am wrestling with this question myself.
Okay.
I think the poetry right now, the new poetry, is kind of going into the these altered book pages that I'm doing. I have four of those projects going on right now.
Okay.
And I am working on a book of regular poems, those prose poems.
Mm-hmm.
But all the fiction I'm working are all ebooks now. I've just completed a novella, not this one, but a different one that's an ebook that's in the form of a scrapbook photograph album.
Oh.
And that's the one I'm trying to talk to agents about.
Okay. And they're gonna and you have only, you don't expect to see it in physical form at all. You just
this is the question that we are trying to work through. I mean, I don't care about seeing it as a print book, but apparently publishers don't want to take a book unless they can also have it as a print book, because they don't make any money on the ebooks.
Yes.
So
blame Amazon, right?
Yeah. So an agent doesn't want to take me on as a client unless I am doing the print book, and the ebook is a sort of bonus.
Oh, okay.
So that's what we're kind of going around and around about, and then I think, well, maybe I'll just go out there and do it on my own, or try to do it with an ebook publisher who is just doing that. So this is all new to me, and new territory, and I'm just trying to navigate it myself right now. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. But in terms of like the process and the composition and everything, it still seems pretty much, computer, non-computer, like it's still like a kind of, well, I mean, the computer's a big part of it, but you're still writing the notebook and pushing it in, or is it a lot of that still happening on, are the ebooks happening on the computer?
No, I'm still writing the text part in the notebook. Mm-hmm.
Okay. How does the sort of visual aspect relate back to your writing, especially sort of maybe, I mean, you use a lot of imagery in your poems and in your fiction, but now you're actually using images. So
yes.
What's that feel like? I mean, are you using them in the same ways you used imagery, or is it a totally different?
Well, I mean, you hit it right on the head. That's it exactly. I mean, everything I loved about poetry, the image thing.
Yeah.
Now I'm making actual images, and I'm putting a little bit of text in there, and now I'm starting to wrestle with, well, that's too much text. It's everything that's happening now has gotten to be less and less text.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the right balance between the visual component on the piece, and that sort of means minimal text, I think.
Yeah.
So that they don't fight each other.
I mean, so what is like, how do you find the right language for that? I mean, like, what sort is that? I mean, that seems like almost a different thing than writing poetry. I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that, I mean,
like
see, this is what, for me, when I turned 60 and I'm doing this work, it's made it exciting again, like when I was 20.
Yeah.
Because language has been refreshed by this new sort of interjection of the actual visual material in the same location with the text.
Right.
And it's made it like a brand new thing for me, and I don't know, I feel like, oh good, now I can get through to my 80s okay, and without being bored.
If you didn't, so a kind of two-part question. If you didn't have that facility with the computer that you have and that you developed from working with PageMaker, and or if you just had not worked with the computer, do you think you would have turned to visual art in a physical format? But it's, okay.
No. It would have been too much to learn, I think.
Okay.
I mean, it still feels like a lot to learn. I mean, I take classes every week. I'm taking online classes. I mean, I still can't get how to do text on a path. What's wrong with me? I can't make my paths good.
Okay. Well, yeah, I am no Photoshop expert,
but anyway, so I take these little online classes through Photoshop.
Do you take any, I mean, your husband's an artist. Do you have any sort of art instruction as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
From him.
From him.
Yeah, and I've been taking like regular college classes too.
Okay.
Where when I taught at Bucknell for a semester, when they asked me to come out there, I said, well, yes, I'll come, but do you think it would be all right if I sat in an art class while I'm there? I wanted to take some kind of photography class.
Oh, okay.
But they weren't offering anything, so I took a film editing class instead. But anyway, I felt like I just needed to be in that environment with visual artists where they're talking about composition.
Yeah. Because
I was starting at that beginning place.
Yeah.
Just composition and design.
Right. Right. No, I think there's so much.
And my husband comes and I invite him to come home early, a couple nights a month, and I ply him with some wine, and he sits here, and then I show him the pieces that I'm working on, some of these photomes or whatever, and I'll say, okay, now just if you don't like a piece, just tell me and we'll move on. And so this is what he'll do. He'll go, next. But then when he likes a piece, he'll explain to me what he thinks is working, and it's all about composition and design.
Okay.
And that's what I need to
learn. And so that's a big part of your education.
That's what I need to learn.
Yeah. I think that's good.
Oh,
I
okay.
think we've got quite a bit. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Your questions were really good. Thanks for
I know
listening to me blah blah blah.
No. I think it's good. It's going to be fun to parse and.
Now you're going to have to edit all this, huh?
Yeah. Put something into the grant to get somebody to transcribe it. I think we might need to do that. So. Anyway, we'll figure it out.
Transcribing's pain.
I know. Yeah.